What happens when a legendary British actor sits down for what should be a warm, friendly morning interview, only to be blindsided by a barrage of personal attacks that push him to his breaking point? In just 35 seconds, a respected television host shattered her own reputation, stunning the studio, humiliating her guest, and sending shockwaves through the entertainment world. Her comments were so vicious, so shockingly unprofessional, that even her own crew struggled to process what they were hearing. This is the story of how Sir Michael Caine, a knight of the realm, a 2-time Academy Award winner, and one of cinema's most beloved gentlemen, was cornered live on air. A moment where staying silent meant swallowing disrespect, but speaking up meant risking a televised walk-off, seen by millions. A moment where politeness met its limit, and where dignity finally snapped. The morning had started like any other. Michael arrived early, impeccably dressed, ready to promote his latest memoir, an intimate collection of stories from 6 decades in film. Backstage, the crew was buzzing. This was Michael Caine, charming, funny, adored. Everyone expected warmth, nostalgia, and witty anecdotes. Lorraine Kelly greeted him with a smile as the cameras rolled. At first, everything was as expected. Light, pleasant, effortless. Michael spoke about his childhood in South London, his early breakout roles, and the people who shaped his career. The audience leaned in, captivated. Then, something changed. Lorraine's tone sharpened. Her questions turned cold. With a polite smile masking a sudden edge, she asked, "Michael, you talk about your humble beginnings, but sitting here now in your expensive suit and luxury lifestyle, do you still relate to ordinary people? Or have you become a bit too comfortable in your ivory tower?" The room froze. Michael, ever the gentleman, responded calmly, speaking of his roots, his working-class upbringing, and the values he never forgot. But Lorraine smelled blood. She pressed harder. "Isn't it easy to talk about humble beginnings when you're sitting on millions?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Michael's smile faded. His hands tensed. He defended his life's work, his decades of effort, sacrifice, and perseverance. But Lorraine wasn't finished. She suddenly pivoted, crossing into territory no professional interviewer would dare to touch. "You've been married twice. Doesn't that reflect a lack of commitment? Some people say you just walk away when things get hard." Gasps, audible gasps. Michael went silent, stunned at the invasion into his private life. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but wounded. He called the line of questioning inappropriate. Lorraine laughed, actually laughed, and that was the moment everything snapped. Michael's voice grew firm. His patience evaporated. He made it clear he hadn't come to be attacked, ambushed, or dragged through personal mud. The studio energy flipped. Producers panicked in the control room. Camera operators exchanged uneasy looks. Everyone knew this interview was spiraling beyond recovery. And Lorraine, she kept pushing, completely unaware she was about to trigger one of the most infamous walk-offs in live TV history. "Ambushed?" Lorraine repeated, her voice dripping with theatrical disbelief. "I'm just asking questions, Michael. If you can't handle a few straightforward questions, maybe you're not as tough as all those hardened characters you play on screen. Maybe the real Michael Caine is a bit more sensitive than we thought. That was the breaking point." For decades, Michael Caine had been known throughout the industry as a consummate professional, graceful, patient, dignified under pressure. But in that moment, something shifted. Slowly, without anger or theatrics, he rose from his chair. He didn't storm out. He didn't explode. He simply stood, calm, steady, composed. With deliberate care, he unclipped the microphone from his lapel and set it gently on the coffee table. The studio held its breath. "I've worked in this industry for over 60 years, he said, his voice firm but heartbreakingly restrained. "I've been interviewed thousands of times. I've faced tough questions, difficult conversations, even confrontations. But I have never, not once, been treated with such blatant disrespect. This isn't journalism. This isn't entertainment. This is cruelty, dressed up as conversation. Lorraine tried to interrupt. Michael, I think you're He lifted a hand, stopping her cold. No, I am not overreacting. I am responding appropriately to inappropriate behavior. You've insulted my character. You've dragged my personal life into the mud. And you've done it not in pursuit of truth, but in pursuit of spectacle. I won't take part in it. The studio was silent. 200 people, crew, audience, staff, even Lorraine herself, watched as a legend chose dignity over airtime. Finally, Lorraine's expression cracked. Panic flickered in her eyes. She tried to pull it back. Michael, please. Sit down. Let's start over. I didn't You meant every word, Michael replied, still composed. And that is what makes this moment so deeply disappointing. This wasn't spontaneous. This was intentional. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. He turned toward the exit. But then, one last tragic mistake. Lorraine called after him, her voice sharp, defensive, and dripping with condescension. Running away, Michael. How brave. I suppose the mighty actor can't handle a little heat from a Scottish woman half his size. Michael stopped mid-stride. The entire room froze. He turned back, not angry, but profoundly sad. This has nothing to do with heat, he said quietly. It has to do with recognizing when a conversation has turned toxic and having the self-respect to leave it. I truly hope you reflect on what happened here today. For your sake! And with that, he walked off the set. The cameras kept rolling. Lorraine sat alone, stunned, defensive, and visibly rattled. The audience began whispering, then murmuring, then openly reacting. Some applauded Michael. Others stared in disbelief. But everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed a career-defining implosion. And to truly understand how it came to this, we have to rewind. Because this explosion didn't come out of nowhere. The fuse had been burning since the very first shift in Lorraine's tone. After the cheerful opening, she began inserting little barbs into her questions. Michael tried to meet them with warmth, humor, and honesty. When she questioned whether he still understood ordinary people, he responded with genuine emotion. Speaking of his father at the fish market, his mother cleaning houses, the cramped flat he shared with his brother, the hunger, the struggle, the reality. Lorraine dismissed it with a smirk. Not enough. Not authentic. Not convenient. Then she took it further, attacking his status, his success, his very identity. And when that didn't break him, she went after something sacred. His marriages, his family, his private life. That's when the interview stopped being an interview. That's when the ambush began. The moment the interview crossed the line, from uncomfortable to outright unacceptable, was when Lorraine shifted from questioning Michael's choices to questioning his character. She didn't just probe his past. She implied moral failure. 2 marriages. She repeated, emphasizing the number like evidence in a trial. Some might say that shows a pattern, an inability to make things work. What do you say to that? Michael recoiled, not with anger, but with hurt. My personal relationships are exactly that. Personal. He replied, steady but wounded. I've loved deeply. I've experienced loss. I've built a family I'm profoundly proud of. To reduce all of that to a tabloid soundbite is not only unfair, it's cruel. But Lorraine wasn't finished. Your current wife is significantly younger than you. She pressed. Does it ever feel like you're trying to recapture your youth? Deny the aging process? The audience gasped. It was a naked provocation, a calculated insult. Michael's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the armrests, but his voice remained controlled. My wife is a brilliant, accomplished woman whom I love dearly. The suggestion that our marriage is anything but genuine is offensive to both of us. Lorraine leaned in, relentless, still. she insisted. "You have to admit, it looks a certain way. Older man, younger woman. It's a story we've seen 1,000 times. The powerful man with the trophy wife. That phrase, the sneer behind it, the dismissiveness of it, was the penultimate straw." Michael's voice dropped, quiet and razor-sharp. "My wife is not a trophy. She is a human being with her own career, her own achievements, her own life. Reducing her to an accessory says far more about your world view than about our marriage." Lorraine smirked. Actually smirked. "Touched a nerve, have I?" "You've crossed a line," Michael replied. "There's a difference between probing journalism and a personal attack. Right now, you're doing the latter." And then she delivered the final blow, the jab that broke whatever patience he had left. She questioned his toughness, mocked his resilience, and implied that the man who spent a lifetime playing heroes couldn't handle a few real questions. In one breath, she called him thin-skinned, fragile, weak. For Michael Caine, a man who built an entire legacy on integrity and strength of character, it was the most insulting accusation she could have made. And to think, 20 minutes earlier, everything had been pleasant. He had been warm, charming, full of stories. Kubrick, Connery, near-miss roles, career-defining decisions. The audience adored it. Lorraine seemed genuinely engaged. Then something changed, whether it was a producer's note in her earpiece or a sudden hunger for viral controversy. Her tone pivoted. The questions turned into accusations. The interview warped into an ambush. And for the first time in over 6 decades of interviews, Michael Caine realized the most dignified response was to walk away. But before he did, there was a final exchange. A clash of values in its purest form. Not fame versus fame, not guest versus host, but respect versus sensationalism. Mic in hand, he stared at it, almost mournfully. "This device," he said quietly, "is meant to amplify voices, to share ideas and stories, but too often it's used to amplify cruelty instead. Even then, he set the microphone down gently, deliberately, respectfully, because even in disappointment, Michael Caine refused to be careless." Lorraine shifted in her seat, her confidence slipping. "I'm just doing my job," she snapped. "This is what interviews are now. People want authenticity. They want real conversations, not promotional fluff." Michael shook his head. "Authenticity doesn't require cruelty. You can ask challenging questions without dehumanizing someone. You can have a real conversation without tearing a person down. The fact that you don't see the difference is deeply troubling. So what would you have me do?" Lorraine fired back. "Toss softball questions? Let you plug your book and walk away untouched? I would have you treat me like a human being." He answered. "That landed." The audience applauded. Instinctively, defiantly, Lorraine faltered, visibly rattled. And then, grasping to regain control, she launched her final taunt about him running away and being unable to handle the heat from a Scottish woman half his size. It was meant to belittle him. It was meant to break him. Instead, it finished her. Because Michael's response, his quiet insistence that recognizing toxicity and walking away from it is an act of self-respect, had been so undeniably, so obviously right that even Lorraine's most loyal supporters couldn't defend her. As he made his exit, his back straight, his steps controlled, he didn't storm or flinch or glance back. The main studio camera followed every second of that walk, capturing an expression not of rage, but of disappointment. He looked like a man who had hoped for decency and been let down, a man who had offered chances, watched each be squandered, and finally accepted the truth. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Lorraine sat alone at her desk, facing an audience stunned into absolute silence. She forced a bright, brittle smile. "Well," she said, her voice just a little too high, a little too rehearsed. "That was certainly unexpected. Michael Caine, everyone, leaving the interview early. We'll take a quick break and be right back." But the damage wasn't waiting. It had already landed. In the control room, producers barked rapid-fire instructions, trying to contain the fallout. Online, clips of the walk-off were already exploding. Viewers who had been watching live were typing in disbelief, their shock and outrage flooding social platforms within seconds. What was meant to be a warm, breezy segment promoting Michael's memoir had instead become a masterclass in how to destroy an interview in real time. And what made it especially brutal was the contrast between the two people on that stage. For more than 60 years, Michael Caine had navigated public life with generosity, humility, and respect. No scandals, no feuds, no cruelty. He treated runners, caterers, directors, and studio heads exactly the same. His reputation wasn't just built on talent, it was built on character. Lorraine Kelly, meanwhile, had built her entire brand on being comforting, safe, and open. She wasn't supposed to attack. She wasn't a shock jock or a late-night provocateur. She was morning television, the cup of tea, not the slap in the face. But that morning, she'd abandoned the very qualities that made audiences trust her. She chose mockery over curiosity, hostility over humanity, cruelty over connection. Why? That question would dominate headlines and panel discussions for weeks. But in the moment, none of the speculation mattered. What mattered was what millions had just seen. A respected guest belittled, a line crossed, and a decision made. Michael Caine's walk-off wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't ego. It wasn't drama for drama's sake. It was a measured, thoughtful choice made after every other option had been exhausted. He had given her outs. He had offered grace. He had tried, again and again, to steer the conversation back to dignity. But once it became clear that she wanted the ugliness, that she was committed to the confrontation, he chose the only honorable path left to him. And think about the stakes. He was in the middle of a major press cycle. He knew that leaving would spark controversy, headlines, noise. He knew critics would pounce, at least at first. But he also knew that some things outweigh promotion. Some values are not negotiable. Self-respect is not a marketing variable. Dignity is not something you trade for airtime. When the cameras cut to commercial, the studio itself seemed to fracture. Crew members shook their heads. One boom operator quietly set down his pole and walked off, unwilling to continue. For a moment, even the show's own staff could no longer pretend they were simply doing their jobs. A stage manager approached Lorraine, urgently whispering in her ear. Her face shifted, from irritation to doubt, to the cold realization that this moment would not pass, that this would become the moment, the headline, the legacy, because this wouldn't blow over by noon. This wouldn't vanish by Friday. This would follow her. Michael Caine, by contrast, had already exited the building. Witnesses said he walked calmly to his car, kindly declined questions, and left without a single raised voice or slammed door. No theatrics, no bitterness, just dignity, quiet, steady, unshaken. The interview had been scheduled for 30 minutes. It ended at 22. Those 22 minutes, especially the final 8, would be replayed, dissected, and studied for years. Media analysts would break down every frame. Journalism schools would use it as a cautionary tale. PR experts would call it a textbook disaster. But in that studio on that morning, it was something much simpler. A good man who had reached his limit. A man who had tried to remain gracious. A man who had maintained civility in the face of provocation. A man who finally chose dignity over compliance. It was a reminder that respect is not optional, that kindness still matters, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk